Hey guys, this is Witty and welcome to another Warcraft movie video where I'm going to essentially critique the critics because it seems that the critics have been slightly nasty towards the Warcraft movie, mostly because they're mean. But I'm sure there's more to this and we're going to uncover the truth, hopefully. Or at least go through a lot of critics and their opinions and then try to destroy those opinions. Or at least come to some sort of rational opinion back. You know? A little bit of rationality might be nice. So you guys did respond kindly and very well to the Warcraft movie review that I did, The Beginning and more. I much appreciate all of your feedback. And I have to say that a lot of you were quite biased. And I love you for that. But there was also criticisms, mostly with Garona overall with you guys, finding her a little bit wooden and not believing her true character. However, in the movie I found her to be alright. Not much more than that. I think there was more to her, more nuance than meets the eye. But thank you everyone for pitching in, and hopefully maybe you do the same in this video as well. So let's take a look, shall we, at the Warcraft page, the movie, on IMDb.com. The Warcraft 2016. So this has 8 out of 10 with 22,406 votes currently right now, which is very high indeed. Now we might be able to get into a bit of depth if we look a little bit further as to why that is, because it turns out that people might be a little bit biased, but that's okay. It's a Warcraft movie. It's been around for 20 years. People love the games. They come and they play. They've been there. They've done that. It's been part of their life. So you can kind of understand having a little bit of bias towards it. It has skewed the results a little bit, as we can see. If we have a look, you can see that the Warcraft ratings, the user ratings, so this is personal user ratings, this isn't like professional critics or anything like that. 10,000 votes are 10 out of 10. Now there's not many movies, if any, I would ever give 10 out of 10 to. So that is some flat bias. And then once you go past that point, you still have the majority being 9 to then 8 to then 7 to then 6. As you can see, it does flow quite kindly. And of course, the 1 out of 10 has to have a little bit more than, say, 2 or 3 or even 4. And it's medium with 5, because most people are like that. They either absolutely go too far and give it 10 out of 10, or they go too low and give it 1 out of 10. So really, the way I look at it is to almost remove all of those people that have voted it 10 out of 10 and remove those that have voted it 1 out of 10. And kind of like trying to take a medium from 2 to 9, I think is a much more accurate way to gauge how well a movie has done, generally speaking. 22,000 votes is pretty reasonable considering the Apocalypse X-Men movie came out recently. That's like 80,000 votes, but that's been out since 15th of May. Warcraft has still got to go to a lot of different countries, and comparing to other movies like Angry Birds or Bad Neighbors and movies like that that have recently just come out in cinemas, it's actually got more votes, in fact double the amount of votes compared to quite a lot of movies. So it's not like you could say, oh, 20,000 people just being biased, but normally you'd have 100,000 people. If you had 100,000 people vote, the results would probably be more like 7 out of 10, more accurate. Perhaps that's the case, but generally speaking, it's actually got a lot of people voting, so 8 out of 10 is very impressive. IMDb is always going to be the kindest of websites, and I like that because it's also, I find, generally speaking, quite accurate for the most part. Whenever I look at IMDb, I go, yeah, that was like a 6.5 out of 10. It was watchable, did the trick, wasn't terrible. Oh, it's 8 out of 10 or 7.8 out of 10. I really got something out of this movie. Now, Warcraft, for me, would be there, 8 out of 10, because I'm biased. If I was to take that bias away, I would probably give it 6.9, 7 out of 10. If I was just being absolutely, completely and utterly accurate without my bias, that's purely based on how gripped I was by a lot of the characters, which wasn't particularly gripped. And I find that the movies that had the largest impact on me are the movies that allow me to feel what the character is feeling, to get behind them, to feel emotional for their story. And I did have that with Warcraft, with quite a few characters, particularly Durotan and Khadgar. But it fell flat on other characters, which is where I think some of this critique is coming in here, where the critics, the professional critics that aren't too happy. So if we take a look at RottenTomatoes.com and we just look at some of these reviews and try to read them out and then ascertain where they're coming from and whether they're correct or whether there's a response to that would prove them wrong. So let's begin with Tom Huddleston from Time Out. Top critic says, like its 10-foot anti-heroes, Warcraft is noisy, lumbering, and not terribly bright. So he's trying to be very buzzwordy here and doesn't really give all that information other than not finding much depth to the plot from what I can ascertain from this. So I can't take much from that criticism. I suppose his review has to be short. He does say there is a full review, so if we go to full review, we might be able to get a little bit more out of it. Time Out says 2 out of 5. Users say 5 out of 5. There might be some slight, difference. I can't even say that word. Different opinions from the users and the critics. So this is kind of what we're coming across a lot of the time here. Travis Fimmel is a walking charisma void, a strapping warrior Anduin, a sort of Aragon without the personal charm, Aragornness. He's the land of Azeroth's best hope against those murderous dimension-hopping orcs, and he's backed by a plucky band of equally forgettable white dudes with... This is terrible! This is terrible, and this is basically the reason why Warcraft is getting these terrible sort of like reviews in terms of professional critics, because these professional critics are people that don't like Warcraft, or they're comparing it directly to Lord of the Rings, which isn't a direct comparison to Lord of the Rings, and that's the mistake they're making. You can see this is awfully written. Terrible. Like, I could critique this. The snaggle-toothed orc foes have a touch more personality despite being buried under layers of CGI. Toby Kebbell gives real warmth to Durotan, the chieftain for whom randomly massacring humans doesn't always guarantee a good time. He always embodies Jones's most interesting and tricky conceit that newcomers to your land might not be there to wreck the place, that the film implies most of them probably are. The total absence of originality here is notable, but it needn't be too much of a problem with a tighter plot, a touch of humour and some peppier, less slab-fisted action scenes. Now that's a little bit more useful. The last paragraph here, where he's actually sort of given us some information, some actual reasoning behind this critique, rather than just a bunch of buzzwords that don't actually mean anything, apart from the fact that they're obviously not very much into the film, nor were they probably ever going to be into the film. Alright, I'm not going to spend too much time on these full reviews, and it's not necessarily fair to sort of like just judge them on these bite-sized quotes that they have, but you can get a rough idea of where they're coming from. Now we have Jamie East. Unless you have immersed yourself in the game, you won't give a single jot about anyone in the film. Now, that's a rotten score, and I actually do have to agree with this. I'm not going to read the full review because I can kind of agree straight away with that. I did say if you're interested in Warcraft or Lord of the Rings, you're going to get something out of this. You can, even though I said it's not directly comparable to Lord of the Rings, which is the mistake I think people are making. They're going, this is Lord of the Rings, the sequel or something. It's not. It's a totally different genre. It's completely different in so many different ways. If anything, it's more like Warhammer, which there still isn't a movie out on, surprisingly enough, even to this day. Or not the one that I know of. But this is accurate because you kind of have to be aware of what Warcraft is to get something out of it, whereas it's not been in the mainstream for long enough, Warcraft, for people to be so knowledgeable of all the characters and therefore connect to all those characters and get something out of all those characters. This is where the critics are coming from. They are basically being super harsh because they don't understand the characters, nor do they truly want to understand the characters. Films like Lord of the Rings, J.R. Tolkien wrote those, I think, in the First World War or the Second World War. We're talking like 1920s plus, around that era, you know, the very early 1900s. So that's been part of our culture, and stories have been told around that universe for so many years that there's not really anyone that doesn't know about them. Whereas Warcraft is relatively a baby in comparison. So this is where these critics are coming from, and they're wrongfully comparing it directly to Lord of the Rings. Now, let's have a look at David Eric. He says, a once-in-a-generation disaster and one of the most ill-advised and ill-conceived studio films of this modern blockbuster. I mean, it is clickbaity. I feel tempted to click on the full review, but it's just... these bite-sized comments are just generic. Like, that doesn't tell me anything about the movie. It just tells me that you didn't like it. Why? How is it a disaster? How is it the most ill-advised and ill-conceived? Really? Really, mate? Or are you just pulling words out of your arse to make it sound like it's more worthy of people's attention? That's the impression I get from that. Let's have a look at a positive one, which is kind of accurate right now, because you typically with the Rotten Tomatoes, I think it's sitting at about 24%, so 1 out of every 4 people like it. Well, this is the 4th person, and he is Jack Bottomley. And he says, the film surprises in many ways, but comes down to big warriors atop fantastical beasts, lobbing big-ass weapons at each other's toothy green-skinned and dreadlocked headed mugs. So what's not to like? Now that is also almost just as useless as the one beforehand, because it doesn't really tell you much other than them... They're not looking at any of the nuance or the depth. However, that does summarize a lot of the movie in terms of its CGI elements. Yeah, the big warriors and everything is quite over the top and fantastical, and there's a lot of orcs in it. But that... where's the bite-sized information that gives you what the movie's all about? What's the direction? How deep are the characters? They don't talk about any of this stuff. It's just crap, which makes it really hard to take this seriously. And unfortunately, places like Rotten Tomatoes and that have a large impact, okay, on people's reviews going forward. If people see that it's gone 24% on Rotten Tomatoes, it perpetuates that mentality to go, oh, it probably is a bad movie. My review is now going to be tainted because I have to follow suit and say something bad about it as well, rather than being non-tainted and not knowing about the results. So I feel like it's a self-fulfilling prophecy a lot of the time with these poor results. Now bear in mind, if we just take a look here, Rotten Tomatoes has Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Out of the Shadows at 35%. That is 11% higher. Now, I'm not the best critic of movies, nor have I ever claimed to be, but I wouldn't say that Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the frickin' sequel to the one that wasn't very good in the first bloody place, is better. It's more the fact that his mainstream has got Michael Bay by it, and people are probably trying to please him a little bit more than they're trying to please Duncan Jones. So I feel like there's some strong biases here in just not only the user reviews, because again, don't go give it 10 out of 10 because that's not accurate, but these critics, it feels sometimes like they've been bought out when you see films like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles at a higher rate. Now don't get me wrong, Warcraft wasn't a genius movie. It didn't revolutionize our thinking of how movies are to be made in the future, but it certainly isn't 24%, so Rotten Tomatoes really let me down on this one, I feel. Now, let's move over to another site which I think is even worse, which is Metacritic. Now, if you thought the Rotten Tomato reviews were pretty bad and vague and didn't really give you much information but still managed to slag off the film as much as possible, you wait until you see these. This is the Metacritic reviews, which is at a score of 31 based on 13 critic reviews. Okay, so let's start with the highest one, The Hollywood Reporter. The movie is character-driven every step of the way. That's why even if the world created by Jones and his talented design collaborators, both old-school physical and cutting-edge digital, isn't seamlessly believable, so much as staggeringly crafted, it casts a spell. What? Now, am I lost here, or did you actually get anything out of that? It says it's character-driven every step of the way, but doesn't go any further to elaborate on why it's character-driven every step of the way. If anything, the last part of it suggesting that it isn't believable at all suggests that it isn't character driven, because if it was character driven and you were behind the characters, you would be more in belief of what they were portraying in the film and what their, you know, their morals and their standards were in the film. These reviews, it's just crap. You can tell I'm slightly biased here, but the total film, 60, tasked with brokering a peace between event-sized thrills, gaming lore, and high fantasy. Jones embraces Warcraft's world with laudable commitment, but when it comes to charging it with life, sheer bulk gets the better of him. I can get a little bit more out of that, but it's just like, where's the depth to that? These are just, the problem is these people are getting these reviews out which slag the movie off, and they don't give any evidence or factual statements to back up their opinions. It's just like, oh, okay, I'm a professional critic. This movie sucked. I'm not going to tell you why, but it sucked. 20 out of 10. And where's the repercussion for that? Why do they get to put their vote out, and then that goes up on the website and gets to be counted? Therefore, it ergo has an influence on anyone else seeing that review and going, oh, maybe the movie isn't that good. This goes back to my point, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. These people aren't being held accountable. They get to basically slag off the film with no fucking evidence or proof behind like their statements. No depth to it whatsoever. And there's no repercussion for them. So it's terrible when professional critics can do that. That's the sort of thing you expect from users, but not necessarily professionals. I don't think I can go through too many more of these, to be honest with you. It's going to drain me too much. The playlist, 50 out of 10, 100. Warcraft may provide grand, thunderous spectacle as it transforms human actors into hulking orcs? Okay, referring to mocap. But when trying to perform the alchemy of transmuting genre archetypes into characters with soul, the magic fizzles out. They're just trying to be so buzzwordy. It's just so vague and doesn't really tell you anything. I get it that it has to be short and that we've got short attention spans, but again, you don't really get anything out of that other than someone just saying, oh, it's just... I don't know. Let's have a look at the worst one. 10 out of 100. Imagine Battlefield Earth without the verve, and you get this sludgy, tedious fantasy adventure. A fun, starved dud that's not even unintentionally hilarious. Well, he's not a fan, is he? Right. I'm kind of sick of these reviews, so I'm going to move on to something slightly different here. You can make your own opinions and let me know what you think about those kind of critical reviews, but my overall feeling regarding why the critics hate Warcraft is because they don't understand Warcraft, nor do they want to understand it. What they want to do is tear it to pieces without truly giving it a chance or any hope of redemption. So that's where I come from there, and I think that's a lot of your opinions as well, guys, is that you would probably feel the same way, is that they are just as biased as those that vote 10 out of 10 on IMDb or 1 out of 10 on IMDb. They've already made up their mind. There's not much you can do to convince these people. And unfortunately, their opinions count. And they count fairly respectably towards many average going viewers that go and check these websites and go, oh, maybe I won't go watch the movie. And then that has an impact on the sales. Now, that does, coincidentally enough, bring me on to the next topic, which is the Warcraft movie box office numbers. Now, it's supposedly, according to ArenaJunkies.com, performed pretty damn well. It's had one of the biggest openings this year in Russia and Germany. In the US, however, it's only had an opening projection of 25 million, comparatively bad for its 160 million budget. However, it is important to note that there are still many tickets to be sold and many countries to yet even be able to watch this movie. So in China, it says that ticket pre-sales for the release night are already the 6th highest ranking movie of all time. Now that's really the big one. If we get onto the next part, is we can see all the movies that are coming out Okay, we can scroll down here. We're on the 3rd of June at the moment, and you can see China comes on afterwards at 8th of June, followed by many other countries: Hong Kong, Cambodia, South Korea, Mexico, stepping out to 9th of June, until we get to the 10th of June, where we have USA, which should still have a large impact, even if they aren't so keen on watching the Warcraft, judging by the pre-ticket sales. Now, I imagine that when this goes live in China on the 8th of June, it is going to hit the fan. They are going to have so many views, because Warcraft is massive in China. It really is, in many ways. People don't know that Warcraft 3 is also quite big in China still. It's largely a reason why Warcraft 3 is still expected to receive patches in the future, and, well, game-changing patches, if anything is led to be believed by Rob Breidenbecker and his team, sort of like talking about what they plan to do with Warcraft in the near future. China's quite heavily responsible for that, and they like World of Warcraft pretty much just as much. So you're going to get many views from China, which will hopefully impress the box office enough and the Hollywood producers into creating more Hollywood movies. It was definitely sort of like heavily insinuated that we're going to get a sequel with this, and I think the numbers will be high enough in terms of the profits made for the film that we will see plenty more movies. And I think that's a good thing, because I think the Warcraft movies to come, Warcraft 2 onwards, the stories that are ahead of us are definitely going to be better. Because the Warcraft 1 story, okay, the games, I've played the games, I've got the video up online, the Warcraft 1 playthrough. It's not got that much story to it, okay? They did well with what they had to work with, and Duncan Jones did a great job with all of the characters. My main criticism of the movie is really that they tried to do too much, and that there was too many stories going on, and not enough time to delve into this. Now, it's been quite heavily stated that 40 minutes or so have been cut from the film, so it's actually 40 minutes short, which is a lot of time to develop characters and really understand their motives. And I can't wait to see the bonus scenes and extra details on the Blu-ray when the movie comes out, available to be purchased, because there's going to be a lot of telling stories, and I'll love to get back to you guys on that in terms of my opinion of everything that was missed out on the movie. If you guys want to see more sort of podcast style opinion videos such as this from me, then feel free to let me know in the comments section below, as well as to let me know why you think the critics panned it. But my overall circumstance, Too Long Didn't Read, is definitely that they just didn't understand the movie and they weren't willing to give it a try. Now, that sounds like a bit of a cop-out answer, but I think in the case of Warcraft, that couldn't be more true. It does definitely alienate these popular mainstream critics that are more used to movies of less of a fantastical nature, more drama / thriller movies that are more realistic. They look at this movie, they see it's action, adventure, fantasy, and they go, it's not Lord of the Rings. And then, just thumbs it down and give it 24%, which is disappointing because they're not doing their job properly. I understand that they can't necessarily get that much from it because they're not automatically into the movie, but they're also using that bias and that just to sort of like give a negative influence in the movie, which is incorrect. There's a lot to be taken out of the movie that was great, and they've, from what I've seen of those reviews, they've totally and utterly failed to come up with any decent reasons as to why the movie actually was bad, aside from cheap buzzwords that anyone can spew for a quick click. Alright then, guys, thank you very much for watching this. If you did get something out of this video and you do want to see more, then feel free to please like the video on your way out and share it with others, because that helps it to get around and therefore make it more sort of appealing to others as well, and therefore I can create more of them. So you can see more opinionated pieces like this, where I'm not quite as biased, and I'm bloody biased to Warcraft, but I'm not as biased as these frickin' critics giving it 24% or lower. They get paid for this? I hope not. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. Take care. I'll see you later.